got leather seats. It's got a CD.
Hello, very good evening. Live from the Sage in Gateshead. Jono's behind me. Owen Bennett's already on the gin. In the last few minutes, the four Labour candidates who want to be the party's next leader have battled it out on stage for the top job in their final debate here on Sky News. They've talked tough on the migration crisis, how to deal with IS and indeed the EU. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking to political journalists, pollsters and social media experts to find out who they thought came out on top and how you at home have reacted as well. Well, you've been having your say on where the winners and losers in tonight's debate were using our real-time Sky Pulse tool. Sophie Ridge has the details at the screen for us. Sophie?
Well, lots of people have been voting in this poll. It's certainly not scientific, but over 500,000 people have taken part. 500,000 votes, 8,000 people taking part. So this is the ups and downs of how it's been going. We first asked people, who do you want to win the debate? And I think I can show you that now. Jeremy Corbyn out in front there before the debate happened, remember. But this is what happened after the debate. We asked who actually won. And you can see there, Jeremy Corbyn actually increased his lead over the others. He's on 80.6% there. Liz Kendall actually came second, interestingly, on 9.1%. Yvette Cooper in third place with 5.7%, and then Andy Burnham at the end there at 4.6%. That's a huge difference there. One thing that we also asked, this is something that slightly surprised me actually, off the back of Liz Kendall's question to Andy Burnham, when does he think it's time for a female leader? Here is the reaction to that question. We asked, do you agree with Liz Kendall that it's time for the Labour Party to have a female leader? 30.3% said yes, and no was 69.7%. And I do wonder if that's because such a large majority of people thought Jeremy Corbyn won. He's obviously not a woman, so perhaps that explains that one there.
OK, Sophie, thanks. Let's see what the journalists thought. We've been chatting to them all afternoon. With us again now, Owen Bennett, Owen Jones, Scarlett Maguire, Atul Hatwal. Who won?
Well, it looks like Corbyn won from the applause that he got in the hall. It looked like he got a big applause in the hall of people on Twitter. About in the real world, I think you did. I think Yvette Cooper actually stormed at the end, taking apart his economic plan.
I thought at the end, Yvette was easy. She was the only one with any passion. I thought it was really, really good. But it was clear that in the hall that they were clapping Jeremy. It was as if that they'd gone there having made up their minds rather than that they were listening to what each of them was saying.
That's patronising to that audience. I think you are unfair. No, I think Jamie came on top. I think it's the consensus. I think in that hall, people who were watching according to that. But I think actually the others have upped their game. He's forced them to up their game. And, you know, I think with Yvette Cooper, she was seen as quite technocratic maybe in her approach. You saw her there. I don't agree with her analysis, but you showed her actually having a bit of, passion and determination in what she was saying. But I think what's happened is a man who was 200 to 1, backbench MP, very few people have heard of 2 months ago, has become the man who shaped the agenda. That's what it became at one point, not the Labour debate. It became Grilled Jeremy at one point, didn't it?
That's what you can talk, that man can't he?
I learned from the best.
That passage at the end was one of the defining passages in all of the debates when Yvette
political history
and Jeremy faced off against each other because Yvette was passionate, as Owen said. The caution was thrown aside, the technocratic approach thrown aside, passion, direct, but also actually to the watching members, not the people in the hall, the watching members who are still to vote. Very clear dividing line between someone like Yvette, who's very clear on the economics and actually you cannot print free money doesn't exist, and the Corbyn agenda. I thought Jeremy was on for the first time I've seen properly on the back foot.
Defining moment for you, Scott.
Yeah, it was that easily. That was when Yvette took light and you suddenly realised this was a woman who she was a leader. I mean, there was out of the four of them, Yvette was leader. Andy talked about leadership, but actually Yvette really showed it.
What I would say is that show tonight, if anybody thinks Jeremy Corbyn is talking about UKIP voters with his views on Britain's defence and views on the UN and views that Britain shouldn't intervene overseas and should lower its spending on military, if anybody thinks that it's going to win any UKIP voters over, then they haven't been paying attention for the past few years. So he's not going to win UKIP voters over at all.
Well, just on that, I mean, firstly, of course, this government has been cutting, of course, back military personnel at quite a rapid rate. And I think actually the point I'd make about that is when, according to the polling, Jeremy's been doing best amongst UKIP voters.
If they'd have seen that tonight,
I think
though,
UKIP
the
voters
polling
are
would be different.
I think they're complicated. I don't think we can just lump people together as one demographic. Lots of people, and this is a real challenge. It'll be a huge challenge, whoever's leader. Come on, let's be frank about this. Are people who are fed up with the political elite, fed up with what they see as a kind of identikit sort of
I know, you
politician.
say all this stuff, but the
they're
thing
also
with
angry
people
about
is
things,
what ties
housing
them
and
together is
jobs.
their sense of patriotism, and a place that they see Britain as being should be at the top table in the world. And Jeremy Corbyn tonight said he would take that away.
I think
This is what they do. You need to get in at it otherwise.
The two things I thought came across with Jeremy Corbyn: one, his newness, which does appeal at the moment to some of those disenfranchised voters, will disappear very quickly because, as Owen says, those policies will be absolutely toxic. And two, when he's under pressure, he becomes a sort of rather discursive college lecturer, and at the dispatch box, David Cameron will mince him when he adopts that persona.
I'm just hearing 84.3% of people who voted thought that he won.
That was him loads of times on his phone.
Me and my mum.
Absolutely. No, it's incredible. And very, very few people thought Yvette won. I mean, she got almost nothing.
She was last.
It was amazing.
2.9%, I'm being told.
Absolutely, because it's not.
Hold on.
But the thing about UKIP, which is, I think we have to really, really remember, is it's not about policies. It is about feeling disenfranchised.
Okay.
And also on that, I think, just in terms of winning back people in Scotland, we can't forget that Labour lost 40 out of 41 seats to the Scottish National Party. I do think, look, it's going to be, at the moment, the SNP... One second, Owen. The SNP on 55% and Labour on 20% at the moment, a mountain to climb. The idea that can be turned around in a few months, fantastical. I think he's best positioned also on people who didn't vote. And there is a huge sense of disillusionment out there. Again, a huge challenge.
Hold on.
But I think actually, in terms of the others... Could they do it compared to him? I'm not so sure.
It's this great. We're going to get the people out that don't vote. People that don't vote, don't vote. UKIP tried to go for this strategy. We'll get the people that don't vote. What happened? They've got one MP. It's just not a coherent way to win a general election, to base your policies on people that don't vote. And trying to win Scotland back, of course, it's essential. Even if Labour won Scotland, they still wouldn't have been in power.
The canard about trying to get those non-voters. One, as you say, non-voters don't vote. And secondly, the further you go out trying down the foxhole of trying to get non-voters, you lose voters on the other side. We did some polling at Uncut a couple of years ago and found that between 2010 and 2013, Labour lost 6% of its 2010 supporters. That's because we moved to the left and we lost people in the centre. And the non-voters won't vote, we'll lose people in the centre and we'll collapse. The Labour Party doesn't have a God-given right to exist.
No, of course
we could easily slip into the low 20s and into the teens, and at that point, there may not be a Labour Party in the future.
It's not about left-right. It's about what works. It's about what makes sense to people. It's about what they can hear. And this whole thing about whether we move to the right or left. The problem with Jeremy's policies is, A, they're very old, right? And actually, they don't resonate. He resonates because he's an outsider. But I think you're absolutely right. We're going to get bored. People are not going to go for them.
He resonates
I don't agree with that. I think, look, that left or right, I say this a lot, but, when you go into a pub and start chatting about left or right, people generally go a bit blank. You talk about issues, that's when people can actually engage with you. And actually, what Jeremy needs to do, and this is the challenge he faces, is to build a coalition of low-income and middle-income people. That's why he's been in this race, and you wouldn't think it was some of the media coverage, actually the one been talking about self-employed people. They don't have pensions, they don't have paid sick leave, for example, their income has been falling, and I think what he has to do is prove he can build a coalition of both low-paid people, but middle-class people as well. That's the challenge.
We're out of time. You've got to run for a train. We think that Jeremy won tonight. That's certainly what the polling is saying. Who's going to win on Saturday, Saturday? In a word?
Yvette.
I don't know, but it's between Yvette and Burnham to be the challenger to Corbyn. So.
I think Jeremy could be one.
Yvette.
Okay, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Let's talk about social media. We've been chatting to them again earlier on today. Jim Waterson, Carl Miller and Joanna Geary from Twitter. How did it play out?
A huge amount of conversation, some real interesting spikes. One was around Jeremy's mention of the Sun newspaper.
Yes.
And not buying it. But
Didn't say he didn't read it though.
He didn't know. Where things really started to divide opinion, though, was on his answers around troops on the ground with ISIS, especially when it came to his response on Kosovo. A lot of people were very divided, a lot of support, also a lot of people who were quite angry about his responses.
Okay.
Very interesting mismatch between the public and the Parliamentary Labour Party on Twitter. We had only 80 tweets coming from Labour Party MPs, and most of them through Yvette Cooper. With the larger numbers of the general public, Corbyn absolutely dominated 3 times more mentions, not necessarily favourable, but 3 times more mentions than any of the other candidates.
Same thing as we've seen throughout the campaign. The people in the supposed Labour elite, the people who work as professional Labour staff as the MPs, they're the ones who are going, I can't believe we're actually going to elect Corbyn. And the rest of the public on Twitter and on Facebook are like, we're going to elect Corbyn, it's going to happen. So playing out, it's the same things in the hall that got the applause, in the same way that the guy in the hall who said, is it all right to still like Tony Blair in this party, and got the most lukewarm response of the night. The same thing online, people just being like, this is happening as far as they're concerned, and whether it'll actually, there's a load of shy voters who'll go for Yvette or for Andy in the end, well, we'll see. But the internet, which isn't always a great proxy, but it's a pretty good one when you've got a small election like this, yeah, it seems to like Jeremy an awful lot.
Joanna?
I think that's obviously true that Jeremy's share of voice has been throughout the last couple of months has been dominant. Again, I always think
what are you looking at on there?
We're having a look at what's coming in on Twitter and having a look at some of the data that's coming in. Again, going back to the tweets per minute, I still think we haven't really got the full results yet. Yvette obviously was quite rousing at the end, and so I think we might see some interesting stuff coming out of that.
But don't read it, weigh it. It's not necessarily a good philosophy, is it, when trying to figure out which way people are going to vote?
No, it's not, and it's still a question for researchers like me to scrabble away on, to actually work out what any of this actually means when it comes to raising volunteers, raising money, or actually voting. But what we can say is that there does tend to be some kind of correlation between buzz on social media and then and warmth for a candidate. We are actually increasingly seeing this when we look back at the general election this year. It was hidden away underneath.
The thing I'd like to see is if Jeremy Corbyn does win the election, and in 2 weeks' time we're dealing with him in charge of the Labour Party, all these people who are great at swarming online polls, all these people who are brilliant at getting him trending top of Twitter, to see whether the same people who go out on doorsteps and knock and put leaflets through on a cold November evening going, I'd really like you to think about voting for Jeremy Corbyn for Labour, or whether they think that you can do it all from sitting in front of your laptop on the sofa while watching the telly.
But what's really important is if Corbyn actually use technology to do what he says he wants to do with the Labour Party, which is to turn it from a hierarchical top-down movement into a general social one. The digital world has to play a role in that, and I think all eyes now are on any of the winner of that race to actually use digital democracy, to use these new amazing ways in which the party can reach out to the members of the general public, in which MPs can talk to people, in which people can talk to each other, to actually change the way in which politics is actually done and make it more open and participatory.
Which of these four leaders or potential leaders has harnessed new media, social media, Twitter best, would you say, for this campaign?
They've all used it in different ways. I think when it comes to Corbyn's campaign, it's been where he's really resonated is his honesty around policy. Certainly the most retweeted tweets that he's put out on his account have been very much about his core policies, the nationalisation of railways and some of the other aspects about the UN, that sort of side of things. Andy has been very good at being more personable. And talking about other aspects of his character. I think one of his top tweets is actually about him complaining that his favourite band was not available on Radio 2. So obviously that resonates well with people. Exactly. People like to know that the person behind the tweets is actually real.
But when they have Twitter handles like Yvette for leader or Corbyn for leader, that works well?
It works relatively well, although after the campaign they'll look a little bit out of date. But again, it's the same thing.
They'll probably delete them.
Maybe they'll go into the ether, or they'll still be sadly tweeting there in 2 years' time, trying to get Liz elected for something else. But one possible thing is that online, a purity of message works well. If you can, and Jeremy Corbyn has a pretty, unnuanced purity of message with everything. The other guys sort of say, we need to make our points more nuanced in order to get elected. He says, here's my belief. It's pretty short. You can put it in an image, you can put it over him, and it works quite well.
Final thought, Carl?
Final thought. There's a big distinction between broadcast and engagement politics. Two big ways you can use social media. Broadcast is just throwing out that message, and actually that's what Jeremy Corbyn's been doing quite a lot, is just been throwing out the messages. I think the big opportunity and the ways in which we see politics being done well on social media, more broadly in the digital world, is engagement. That means actually talking to people, listening to people, engaging in conversations. Liz Kendall, in my view, has actually been the best at doing this. But I think this is a big learning point for the next Labour leader.
Great to talk to all of you. Thanks very much indeed. We're going to be talking to the pollsters very shortly after some more from Sophie.
Well, this is not a scientific poll, but at the same time, there's been 500,000 votes on just how you think the different candidates have done during the Labour leadership. Now, I'm just going to show you a little bit of where men and women differed, because this is quite interesting. all the way down, you can see there that men were less happy about what was going on than women. Women seemed to be more favourable about what the men were saying. And I can show you specifically some of the times when they decided to split. Here, for example, where Andy Burnham was asked, would you sacrifice your principles in order to win an election? We'll just remind ourselves about what he said.
My principles, my Labour principles, go back to that motto that's underpinned our movement for generations, that unity is strength, that you have to stand together, you have to be a united force. So as much as I had huge misgivings about what the party was proposing, I've always put the party first, if you like.
Now, interestingly, men didn't like that at all. They, in particular, weren't happy with what Andy Burnham was saying there. I can show you another point now about Jeremy Corbyn. Now, he, in particular, among women, they really liked it when he criticised the Iraq War and Tony Blair's handling of it. You can see there the graph just shooting up as more and more people were agreeing with him there. This is what Jeremy Corbyn had to say.
I so fundamentally disagree with Tony Blair over Iraq and over the way that he conducted himself in the lead up to the Iraq War and the close relationship he developed with George Bush.
So that in particular went down well with women, although men as well were reacting pretty favourably to Jeremy Corbyn. So overall, what we've been seeing with the Sky News Pulse survey of people, unscientific, but there have been big numbers of people voting, and they in general seem to be really supporting Jeremy Corbyn there in particular. Now, I think we can hopefully show you how people thought, how they reacted when we asked, who do you think has won the debate? Jeremy Corbyn there on 80.6% of people, Liz Kendall on 9.1%. She actually, unsurprisingly, perhaps not necessarily going down too badly with people from other parties other than Labour. Conservative voters said that they thought she did pretty well as well in this debate. Yvette Cooper on 5.7% and Andy Burnham on 4.6% there.
Jonathan?
OK, let's find out what the pollsters have made of tonight and indeed who they think might win as a result. Joe Twyman, regular contributor, head of political research at YouGov, and also another regular contributor, Tom Majinski, director of political polling at Comrades. Gentlemen, what do we make of tonight?
Well, I thought it was a strong performance from Corbyn, but I also thought it was a good performance from Yvette Cooper. But having said that, I don't think it addressed the fundamental issues that all the candidates need to address if they're going to beat Corbyn, who's ahead in our polls at the moment. The key point is that there's a big differentiation between Corbyn and the other candidates. The other candidates are seen by Labour members as all 40-somethings, all former special advisors, all former Oxbridge. And Jeremy Corbyn presents something different, and he did a really good job of presenting that tonight. He's ahead in our polls across all the different groups. And yes, he's more popular among trade union members and he's more popular among new sign-ups. But among others, he's still ahead. And I didn't see much tonight to suggest that there could be a massive amount of movement, but the point is, we don't know. Our last poll was conducted among Labour members just before the ballot papers went out, and there's been a lot of time since then.
If that audience is anything like representative of Labour members themselves, I think Jeremy's in for a great result. He really roused that rabble. I think it was quite astonishing listening to the reactions that he got compared to the others, and particularly Liz Kendall, who wasn't getting much of a reaction from the audience at all.
She didn't get much traction, but actually she seemed to do quite well. She seemed to pick up, and she eventually did better than Yvette.
At the end, certainly, when they were asking each other the questions, they were really, it gave a chance for the candidates to question themselves and come out of themselves a bit more and loosen up. And I think both you saw Yvette going after Jeremy, clearly seeing that perhaps he's a threat to her position and trying to get into second, into first place. So she really tried to question that. But you could see from the audience just how strong a level of support Jeremy has. You don't really get sort of considerers for Corbyn. They seem to really, really like him.
It's worth remembering, of course, that there are second preferences that could come into play in this election, so that could be very important. But of course, there's also the wider issue of the electorate generally, and not just Labour Party members. The key question for any Labour leader, whoever it is can they win back support from SNP voters in Scotland? Can they win back support from UKIP voters in the industrial north? And can they win back voters from the Tories in the south? Now, a lot of that will depend on things like economic management, which we know was very important in the last election, and yet played very little role in this debate. It tended to be on foreign policy instead.
That's right, and if this room is anything to go by, then he's particularly popular here, but how that plays in the wider public, the general public, Tory voters, that the Labour Party needs to win over, UKIP, SNP, he's actually a bit of a Marmite candidate. He's seen as, he sort of elicits strong reactions both positively and negatively. And actually among Labour voters, so not members, sort of more widely people that sort of like Labour would vote for them, actually more people think that he would put them off voting for Labour than any of the other candidates. So he gets strong reactions, both positive and negative, which doesn't really spell electoral success.
We're out of time even. Thanks very much indeed for joining us both here on Sky News this evening. Thanks a lot. So that's the end of our debate for you this evening. It's the last TV debate ahead of the election for the next leader of the Labour Party. Who won as far as you're concerned? Keep in touch. Let us know your thoughts. The news is next here on Sky.